You call that flying? The counselor's voice dripped with contempt as the footage froze mid-frame. An Alliance fighter banking, so hard the hull flexed beyond structural limits. Your pilots are not bold. They are suicidal. They didn't wait for a reply. They never did. The recording clicked off. Elena Reyes leaned back in silence, the counsel's words echoing like a challenge. Her call sign, Bolt, had been earned doing exactly what they now called reckless. She didn't flinch, but she didn't argue either. Not yet. New sim data's in. Lieutenant Mark O'Neill, known simply as Doc, tossed the drive onto the table. High Command wants justification for our methods. They think we're improvising. They think we're guessing. We are, she muttered. No, he replied. We're calculating. They just don't see the math. Official reprimands were piling up. 12 missions, 11 wins, but each with a post-op report filled with red flag maneuvers. Inverted slingshot turns near gravity wells, censored decoy cloaking via radiation bursts, and a zero-thrust drift approach through asteroid fields. Tactics no sim had approved. Maneuvers no alien fleet dared to mimic. Yet they worked. Every time. Until now. The brass had tolerated it. Results bought silence. But with the Zarthol adapting faster than predicted, scrutiny followed. A command review board labeled the last mission a calculated disaster averted only by luck. The footage went viral across internal channels. They dubbed her the Gambler pilot. Praise from the troops. Disgust from the suits. Now they wanted proof. Simulated justification. Replicate the tactics under controlled conditions. The order read. Or your wings are grounded. They think the sims could expose us, Bolt said, eyes locked on the data doc pulled up, that it'll prove we're flying blind. Doc's fingers danced across the screen. It won't. We'll feed it the new parameters. The split-second corrections. The AI models don't predict chaos decisions. That's the edge. The sim would test tactics under the Zarthol Combat AI framework. Version 12.7. It was updated last cycle after the aliens had analyzed hundreds of hours of human engagement footage. Their AI now anticipated all standard evasive patterns, all sanctioned maneuvers, and most conventional countermeasures. It could outfly standard pilots. But Doc had been working on new behavioral overlays. Feeding the simulator the twitchy, rule-breaking style human pilots naturally evolved under pressure. Let them see what reckless really looks like, he said. They preloaded maneuvers that violated at least half a dozen safety protocols. Vector braking with engine cutoffs, multi-axis drift rotation, without flight stabilization, laser pings faked to appear as incoming ordnance, and more. Not suicidal, not blind, just beyond the edges of acceptable doctrine. A pilot's instinct amplified by real-world desperation. Bolt watched it all silently. Then, show me the telemetry on the 10-second roll from Mission 12. Doc pulled it up. She pointed. There. No sim pilot would attempt this. But the wind shear let me ride the thermal to slingshot over the ridge. With 6% thruster. You nearly blacked out. I knew how far I could push. He didn't argue. He knew she was right. What they called recklessness was really the culmination of human experience under pressure. The subtle judgment calls machines couldn't replicate. The brass didn't understand that. The Zarthol definitely didn't. We're scheduled for the sim trial at 0600 tomorrow. All 3 wings will run through identical scenarios. They'll compare results. Expect to be second-guessed in real time. Bolt leaned forward. Then we leave, no doubt. They reviewed every maneuver from the last 4 missions, not to refine them, but to understand why they worked. Because in this sim, they wouldn't be flying themselves. Protocol demanded remote-controlled replicas flown through pre-programmed sequences. No gut checks, no mid-air corrections, just execution. That's what made this dangerous. Human decision-making translated into data is never as good as the real thing, but it had to be enough. Doc paused. I've encoded live feedback loops. If the system flags anomalies, it'll correct without overriding the core maneuver. Keeps the integrity intact. You sure they won't see it as tampering? It's within tolerance. Barely. Silence settled between them. Outside the viewport, the stars hung motionless. But Bolt's mind was racing, replaying every split-second decision she'd made in the cockpit, every time instinct took the lead when logic would have failed. Her hands had learned to trust turbulence. Her eyes had learned to read the flickers in enemy shield flicker. These things weren't reckless. They were human, and the enemy couldn't match it. The Zarthol flew like they coded, with precision and overwhelming firepower. But they didn't adapt mid-battle. They didn't make gut calls. They didn't feel the fight. Once this works, Bolt said quietly, they'll stop doubting. No, Doc said, they'll start copying. She smiled, better than them being grounded. The simulation would play out in front of the entire fleet command. Silent observers would score every action against a library of approved maneuvers. Results would either vindicate the pilots or kill their methods for good. Back in her quarters, Bolt replayed the counselor's words again. Not bold, suicidal. She laughed once, not bitter, just tired, because she knew what they would see in the sim. They would see dives that skirted gravitational thresholds, missiles launched without locks that tricked enemy guidance, ships rotated mid-spin to present false heat signatures. They would see chaos, but only at first. Then they would see it work. She lay on the bunk, eyes closed, listening to hum the ship's core through the walls. Tomorrow they'd understand. Maybe not completely, but enough. The sim would speak in a language they trusted. Numbers, metrics, outcomes. And when it did, it would say what she already knew. Reckless? No, we're just not flying by your rules. The sim bay doors sealed with a hiss. Everything felt colder inside, even though the temperature hadn't changed. That's how it always was before a test. Quiet, clinical, watched. No noise, no margin. The observers were already plugged in. Fleet analysts, command reps, AI behavioral engineers. None of them pilots. Across the screen, the interface booted up. Simulation Protocol 7XE AI Adversary. XARTHUL 12.7. Start INT minus 90 seconds. Doc keyed in the final uplink, feeding in compile maneuver script. You'll be watching from the feedback loop display. All telemetry routed through the top layer, but I've tagged every outlier. Bolt nodded, eyes scanning the code but not reading it. She'd already memorized the sequence. Every twitch of thruster vectoring, every nonlinear velocity spike, every unsanctioned angle of approach. She didn't need to understand the math anymore. She trusted what it meant. Survival. Command's expecting us to match their approved pilot scores, Doc muttered. But they'll start with default maneuver packages. Standard loop and flank patterns. Safe. Predictable. Dead. Bolt said flatly. The sim engines fired. A low vibration buzzed through the deck. On screen, the first test wing activated. Wing Alpha, standard protocol, and launched. They watched in silence as the AI-controlled sim pilots followed textbook formations. Angle retention, multi-axis shield coverage, coordinated fire zones. It looked beautiful, efficient, until it wasn't. The Zarthol sim AI shifted its formation mid-run, sliced through the center with targeted overload pulses, and disabled the entire wing in under 40 seconds. Failure. Tactical inferiority detected. Perfect formation. Perfect death, Doc said. Now it was their turn. Wing Delta, custom input package. Human Adaptive Sequence 12A. The virtual fighters lit up. Each rig mimicked Bolt and Doc's last real-world mission. Down to the microsecond. The simulation initialized with their copied maneuvers preloaded, beginning with lateral drift that looked like a mistake on paper. The telemetry data flagged a low thrust imbalance. One of the analysts noted the irregularity. Bolt saw the red ping. She said nothing. The enemy AI shifted its trajectory to exploit what it perceived as a weakness. Just like last time, the human pattern fighter suddenly cut thrust entirely, flipping nose first into line of fire, launching decoy flares on a 2-second delay that tricked the AI into overcorrecting. The enemy missiles flew clean through empty space. Another analyst tagged the maneuver as erratic. Another labeled it non-repeatable. The sim didn't care. It logged dodge successful. Decoy effectiveness 98.7%. The human fighters dove hard. Too hard by the Alliance handbook. Vector trajectory was near comical. Spinning, coasting, then cutting into a slingshot curve off simulated debris. The AI recalculated, but too late. The lead enemy fighter was tagged and neutralized. The feed lit up with yellow tags. Unapproved technique, pilot control override risk, structural integrity breach imminent. But nothing broke. The second run loaded. This time, the AI adjusted. Faster reactions. It now expected the deceptive drift. It tightened its spread, accounting for fake flares. The human sequence preemptively compensated. Using false engine burns to simulate a failed maneuver, the AI moved to flank. Then the second set of code activated, repositioning with an intentional instability in the Z-axis, making the ship wobble in a way that was both unnerving and tactically invisible to radar targeting. The AI fired where the ship should have been, but the instability was deliberate. Sim result? Doc asked aloud. The system returned. Hit avoided. Sim error threshold within human tolerance limits. Bo could feel it now. The shift. The analysts weren't commenting anymore. The next maneuver was the one they debated most. It defied every doctrine in the handbook. A controlled deadspin into an asteroid cluster. Zero thrust, relying purely on momentum and gravitic pull. The sim pilot executed it. Jaws clenched. Every readout screamed red. But the AI miscalculated trajectory. Again, it sent a pursuing fighter through the debris path at too high a speed. Simulated impact. Enemy destroyed. For a moment, the entire feed froze. Review algorithm spun diagnostics. The enemy AI flagged a statistical anomaly. Internal systems began reprocessing the inputs. Exactly what we wanted, Doc said under his breath. Bolt didn't answer. She watched the corner of the feed where internal AI feedback was printed in real time. There it was. Adaptive response failure. Strategic irregularity detected. Logging human pattern. Chaos vector. Chaos vector, she whispered. The sim restarted with new AI parameters. This time, the enemy came faster, tighter, angrier. The final run initiated. Simulated fire raked the edges of Bolt's copied flight path. It grazed virtual shields. One of the observers leaned forward. The final move wasn't explosive. It wasn't flashy. It was elegant, as the fighters curved toward the final target. The preloaded path bent just slightly, a 6-degree off-axis turn that placed the fighters behind an energy swell from a simulated gas giant. The AI lost lock-on. Bolt's maneuvering data kicked in. A triple-axis roll, using only internal torque adjustments. Silent. Invisible. The enemy AI never saw the shot. Enemy flagship neutralized. Completion time, 29.7 seconds. No alarms. No errors. Just the results. The system paused. Then, score, 99.8%. Notes, all tactics non-standard. Success within parameters. The observers looked around. One of them spoke for the first time. Run it again. They did. Same sequence. Same result. A third run. A fourth. A fifth. Each time, human pattern logic, chaotic, instinctual, counterintuitive, beat the simulation. And each time, the AI adapted too slowly. Not because it was dumb, because it was rational. But humans weren't. Not in the air. Not in the fire. And that's why they survived. Doc leaned back, arms folded, eyes on the final report streaming in. You think they understand now? Bolt watched the log for a moment longer. Then she turned. They don't need to understand, she said. They just need to stop calling it luck. The post-sim silence lingered longer than anyone expected. 22 minutes passed before the observers even moved. Reports were being generated in real time, but none of them said what the officers in the room were thinking. The math added up. The data was airtight, but the implications, that was something else. Commander Renix of the Alliance Tactical Oversight Unit finally broke the stillness. Run it against live AI pilots next cycle. We need confirmation outside a test rig. Bolt didn't react. She knew this was coming. Sim results could be rationalized, explained away. They'd call it quirks in the model, anomalies in the feedback loop. But against live Zarthal units, that would strip away every excuse. They're scared. Doc said under his breath once they were back in the observation chamber. Nah, the tactics. Of what it says about their systems. That our instincts aren't an outlier, they're the advantage. Bolt looked at the report in her hand. Line after line of log maneuvering data. Each tag with performance metrics, all outperforming Alliance baseline scores by margins that weren't supposed to exist. They hadn't just matched the AI. They'd humiliated it. Command won't let this go public, she said. If they do, every pilot will start copying the patterns, and most of them won't make it. He frowned. Then what's the play? Controlled rollout. They'll cherry-pick the tactics, sanitize them, package the chaos in something the manuals can tolerate. Doc shook his head. That defeats the whole point. The reason it works is because it breaks patterns. That's not their problem, Bolt replied. Their problem is discipline, structure, reputation, not survival. Not yet. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next 2 days were a blur of debriefs. Every maneuver dissected. Every deviation from doctrine scrutinized by engineers who had never flown a combat sortie. They asked the same questions over and over. Why this dive? Why the engine cut? Why the spin delay? Bolt always gave the same answer. Because it worked. The questions weren't meant to understand. They were meant to rationalize, to fit unpredictable decisions into predictable frameworks. But what she and pilots like her did couldn't be mapped on clean curves. They weren't reckless. They just knew how far the rules could bend before they snapped. And sometimes they bent space-time to survive. The briefing room lights flickered as a final board assembled. Commandant Duros, a veteran of the early Zarthal conflicts, took his seat last. Lieutenant Reyes, he began, your performance in the simulation has sparked considerable debate. Your tactics are effective, but they present substantial risks, both to pilot's safety and fleet coordination. Bolt didn't flinch. Respectfully, sir, coordination doesn't matter if everyone dies following the same script. Murmurs. A pause. Duros tapped the screen. Sim logs show you willingly exceeded multiple safety thresholds. G-force tolerance limits, structural strain protocols, shield overload capacities. Yes, sir. And you would do so again? If it meant winning? Absolutely. He leaned back. You're not afraid of dying, are you? No more than anyone who signs up to fly. She held his gaze. But I refused to lose just to stay within margins designed in a lab. That was it. The real divide. For all the advancements the Alliance had made, for all its AI-assisted tactics and war room simulations, it still operated like survival was a math problem, like wars were fought in clean equations. But humans didn't win wars because of equations. They won because when the number said retreat, someone still pushed forward, and the enemy never saw it coming. Duros looked to the rest of the board. One of the analysts, a civilian specialist in behavioral models, spoke next. We have concerns about scalability. Most pilots cannot replicate these maneuvers without significant risk. They're not supposed to, Bolt said. Then what exactly are you proposing? She leaned forward. Use us, the ones who can. Let others fly safe. Let us fly dirty. The room went quiet. Doc cleared his throat. We're developing an adaptive training program, not to teach the chaos, but to recognize who can survive it. You can't mass-produce gut instinct, but you can identify it. Duros exchanged glances with the others. You're asking us to create a separate wing, outside of protocol. Bolt nodded. Call it what you want. Just let us fight the way we win. The rest of the day was redacted. Officially, nothing was approved. No orders were signed. But later that evening, a restricted access terminal blinked on in Bolt's quarters. One line of text. Project Black Flight. Provisional clearance granted. Report to Hangar 70400 cycle. The program was born without ceremony. No speeches. No fanfare. Just names. 9 pilots. Each flagged as non-standard adaptive combatants. Each pulled from missions where survival had come not from textbook execution, but from something else. Something human. They trained in darkness. No formal schedules. Just simulations fed with random data. Combat environments rotated hourly. Loadouts changed with no warning. Mid-run AI opponents were adjusted for aggression, unpredictability, and chaos tolerance. Half the recruits washed out in 3 weeks. The rest got sharper. Bolt led the flight in silence, not because she lacked words, but because she didn't need them. They all understood. No one was here for medals. They were here because they'd seen what didn't work, and kept going anyway. And in those simulations, against upgraded enemy AI, something strange began to happen. The enemy started hesitating. It didn't know why it was losing, only that its predictive models failed every time Blackflight entered the field. And soon, even the simulation started labeling them differently. Not human fighters, not test cases, but irregular units, no pattern match available. The AI couldn't learn them. It could only fear them. By week 6, Command reviewed the footage. Results weren't just good. They were better than anyone had projected. Near-perfect kill ratios. 0 virtual casualties. No manuals. No doctrine. Just chaos. Just instinct. Commandant Thuros reappeared on the secure feed. Your flight is being activated under provisional command. Live mission engagement begins next cycle. Intel confirms the Zarthol fleet is approaching Vector 19K. You will intercept. You will demonstrate viability. Bolt smiled. The test was over. Now it was time for the real thing. Black Flight launched under complete calm blackout. No support, no oversight. Just coordinates and a countdown. The Zarthol fleet was expected to intercept the trade corridor in under 3 hours. The Standard Alliance defense line had been deliberately pulled back to test one variable. Them. The moment they entered Vector 19K, everything changed. 3 enemy cruisers emerged from subspace, accompanied by a spread of 37 fast attack drones. The odds were lopsided. Exactly how Command wanted it. A crucible, not a fight. The analysts watching from a remote ops hub weren't expecting survival. They were expecting data. Bolt didn't care what they were expecting. She flew without hesitation. Her HUD lit with incoming pings, threat vectors cascading across the display in warning reds and yellows. Predictive models screamed. Retreat, overmatch detected. She shut them off. This was the part no AI understood. When the data said die, but the gut said go. She dove through the outer shell of the enemy formation in a broken arc. One no sane pilot would have attempted, forcing the drones to recalculate mid-approach. 2 clipped each other trying to match her trajectory. Another fired early, tagging its own cruiser in the chaos. Doc's voice cracked and low through the private channel. 3 down. Debris signature masking your trail. Coming in behind. No response needed. Bolt flared hard left, cutting power just long enough to drop from enemy radar, then reignited with a sideways kick that sent her spinning beneath a wave of plasma fire. Any pilot flying by the book would have vaporized on impact, but she wasn't flying by the book. Black Flight swarmed through the open flanks, each one moving on pure adaptation. Unpredictable, unsynchronized, beautiful in its defiance. They weren't flying like a unit. They were flying like predators. The Zarthol adjusted, algorithms recalculating on the fly. But every pattern it expected collapsed the moment contact occurred. These weren't simulations. These weren't rehearsed moves. They were raw. Human. The first cruiser fell in 93 seconds. A perfect strike by Kellen, Flight 4, who pitched sideways through its shielding bubble and let a pulse torpedo roll off manual targeting. No lock-on. No assist. Just timing and nerve. The feed captured it. Analysts logged it. And yet, none of them believed it should have worked. But it had. And it would again. Doc peeled high, drawing 3 drones off course with nothing but engine noise and a reactor decoy. They chased him, thinking they had a trapped pilot. But the signal bounce flipped 2 of their sensors, and the third overcommit into a gravity, well created by the debris cloud. AI didn't panic. But this wasn't about panic. It was about confusion. It was about breaking logic by refusing to follow any. Bolt reached the second cruiser under full manual control. Shield arrays locked onto her heat sig, preparing to fire. She powered down completely. The ship drifted. The AI hesitated. Weapons remained armed. Sensors uncertain. The human signature vanished for a split second. In that heartbeat, Bolt fired. For plasma darts, unfocused and uncorrected, drifted lazily toward the cruiser. The AI ignored them. Then they exploded. Not on impact, but on proximity. Each one laced with pulse interference, frying localized sensors. Just long enough, Bolt reignited and surged straight through the blind spot. One well-placed kinetic spike into the drive core. Second cruiser down. On the far side of the conflict zone, the third cruiser turned to run. It recognized the scenario now. Not a battle. A collapse. The algorithms tagged engagement as unresolvable. It tried to escape. It didn't. Black Flight caught it mid-jump. They left no debris behind. When the last enemy marker blinked out, the field went quiet. Not just in space, but across the ops hub feeds. No one said a word. Then the stats came in. Zartho forces eliminated. 100%. Human casualties. 0. Flight stability. 89.4%. Protocol violations. 76 flags. Outcome status. Decisive victory. Review. Anomalous. Cannot be simulated. Command tried to write reports. They tried to label what had happened. But there were no words in their system for a win that defied logic. So they made new ones. Black Flight wasn't dissolved. It was expanded. Not widely. Not publicly. Quietly. Carefully. Recruitment began for pilots who didn't fit into squadrons. The ones always flagged for recklessness. The ones reprimanded for noncompliance. The ones who flew by feel and somehow always came home. They didn't wear standard uniforms. They didn't fly marked ships. But when things went wrong, when doctrine failed, when AI cracked, when simulations lost their grip on reality, someone always whispered the same thing. Send the ones who don't follow. Their tactics were studied, analyzed, even mimicked, but never replicated, because you couldn't teach chaos. You had to live it. Bolt didn't return to base after Vector 19K. She disappeared with the rest of Black Flight into deep field patrol rotations. No fanfare. No debriefs. Just war. But for years, stories would drift in from the edges of the conflict zones. Tales of impossible turns. Of fighters appearing in blind spots where no paths existed. Of enemy AI freezing mid-run because the math had failed. And always the same ending. They came. They killed. They vanished. And those who survived, on either side, never forgot what they'd seen. Humanity had been called reckless, emotional, unpredictable. They weren't wrong. But what they never understood was that unpredictable is just another word for unbeatable. And now they knew, because the machines had learned something they'd never forget. The hardest thing to simulate is a pilot with nothing left to lose and everything to prove